So science is created by a community of knowledge or a knowledge community. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means. What is a knowledge community? And last week, there was one of you in your questions, you had asked about, well, aren't then, looking at all these different sciences and Chinese medicine and these different religions, it seems that through this class, we've kind of blurred this two columns, these two lists. And so is it true then that all of these are just simple, they're actually different systems of knowledge? And I said, well, maybe we could see it that way. And so I'm going to advance this, this idea in the next 20 minutes or so in talking about knowledge communities. And so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to show some common elements that you have between different sciences, different religions, and even other systems of knowledge, in that all of them are knowledge communities. That does not mean that they're all the same. That does not mean that, the community of physicists is the same thing as a community of Christians, or that the community of Muslims is the same as a community of hunter-gatherers in the Brazilian Amazon. All of these different knowledge communities are different and they're doing different things. But there is something that they all have in common, or that we could compare. And one of them is, first, all of them are a system of faith and knowledge. Second, all of them are based on a set of core assumptions. Third, all of them are generated and validated by a community of practitioners. Fourth, all of the members of this community cultivate certain attitudes, dispositions, and capacities. And what are they doing when they're doing all these things? They're reading signs in the world. Now, all these different communities do them differently. So I'm going to look at 4 different types of knowledge community. And one of them is going to be indigenous knowledge systems. Now, the kind of education that we receive, we've learned something like this. We learned that before the scientific revolution, people lived in wretched ignorance and in fear of nature. So if we compare ourselves to tribes people who live in the forest or in the desert, well, they are in wretched ignorance, and we have this scientific knowledge. But what I'm going to say is that no, they are a knowledge community, and so are those scientists. And the question I would ask, would you be able to survive, for example, in the Arctic? So I come from Canada, and the vast majority of Canadians, now much of the Canadian land area is in the far north, millions upon millions of square kilometers of the Arctic, but vast majority of us Canadians, 99.99% of us Canadians, have never been there. And if I were to go there, I would die. And I would probably die within less than 24 hours. But the Inuit, the Eskimo, as they're often commonly known, prior to modern times, they lived for thousands of years up in the Arctic without any modern technology. How could they do it? Because they have deep, deep knowledge of the world around them. If I go there, I have no knowledge of it. I'm part of a scientific civilization. Maybe I could Google a lot of knowledge on the Arctic, but it's not going to help me. So in the Sahara, we have the Bedouins, people who live in the desert. Without any modern science or technology, they can survive in a way that we could not. They have incredibly deep knowledge of thousands of, what we see sand there, they could identify little weeds, little plants, they could find little places where there's water, where there's roots, so much detail, so much knowledge. The Indians of the Amazon, even children before who have not received modern education. Children, after spending years in the forest, they could name hundreds and even thousands of different plants and beetles, insects, living beings, many of which have never even been cataloged by biologists or botanists. So in fact, they even know many species that modern science has never even listed, cataloged, or described yet. So where does this, so actually, and anthropologists have gone and lived with these people and they've discovered this incredible knowledge. And the other thing is that after they receive modern education, probably this young boy, if he receives modern education, he would then be unable to survive in the Amazon. So he would actually lose his capacity to survive because he no longer has that knowledge. So the indigenous, so all these different tribes are different indigenous communities, and so they have different forms of indigenous knowledge. So I'm going to go through all of the different characteristics that I just mentioned earlier on. So their knowledge is based on, it's a system of faith and knowledge. So why do I say it's a system of faith? Because basically they would say this, they would say that over the generations, our forefathers have transmitted to us the way of living in the forest. If we follow this way, we will survive and flourish. If we don't follow this way, we die. So they have this faith that for, you know, their ancestors learned how to live there, and their parents taught them how to go hunting, how to identify plants, how to identify animals. They learn this from their parents learn from their parents. This has been taught down. They trust the systems of knowledge, so they learn it very carefully, and they build their life on that. So this is in a sense the statement of faith that is at the basis of their knowledge system. And this system of faith is based on a set of core assumptions. So for them, the core assumption is that the whole world is animated. That means that things, plants, animals, and spirits all have consciousness and intentions. We say there's a tree spirit, or there's a jaguar spirit, or this or that. They have, all the beings in the world have consciousness and intentions. So we need to treat them like people. We need to treat them like people. And because we need to treat them like people, we need to know them really, really well. And if we understand them well and treat them well, they will treat us well. So this is basically the set of core assumptions that these people in these indigenous knowledge communities would have. And so based on that, they go out, and when they go out hunting, when they go out picking plants, when they go out, they're always trying to listen to signs. What are these different beings? What are these trees? What are these plants? What are these animals? What are they telling us? What kind of communication are they providing to us? And then we can, based on that, we can hunt them, we can catch them, we can identify what, we can find what we're looking for. So all this knowledge arises, how to hunt, how to know a jaguar, how to understand them, how to understand the trees, the plants, and things like that. So all this knowledge accumulates. So, but this is a body of knowledge. It's not one person who has subjective ideas about, different plants. And it's not also, a book that says all these plants and just says, okay, you memorize it, you believe it. So this is a shared body of knowledge that all the hunters have, all the gatherers, all the women and the men, they all have their own knowledge. They all share it. So it's generated by them. They go out looking for plants, and then they share their experience with others, and the others hear it, and they, so they learn about these places, learn about these plants, learn about how you did it, and things like that. So they're always sharing and things like that. So this knowledge is generated by this community of people who are always talking about what they did, talking about their hunting, about their gathering, sharing experience and knowledge with each other. It's generated and it's validated, okay? That means that they won't all believe each other, So one young guy says, oh, I saw a polar bear over there. And so the others are gonna, they're gonna, really? So then, and one person saying, nah, you must have been you know, you saw something moving, but it's probably not a polar bear. Another person says, well, you know, I saw one a little further on. And, you know, and one bug guy in the back of his mind is thinking, this young guy, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But another one might say, oh, well, he's already got a lot of experience hunting, you know, so they're doubting each other, you know, they're arguing, you know, people are not blindly believing everything, right? So it's through these conversations that the knowledge gets validated, that it gets tested and validated. And so they cultivate certain attitudes, dispositions, and capacities. That means they have to learn how to listen, to remember, to observe, and to communicate and to hunt. They have to listen to the environment around them, to remember every little fact and detail about whatever they saw, wherever they went, every little thing, to remember it, to observe so carefully, to communicate. And for them, it's to communicate with those beings, but also to communicate with each other all the time. And of course, learn how to hunt and how to gather. So they need to have all of these dispositions, these abilities. And they need to read signs in the world. What kind of signs? So, the signs being communicated by other beings in the world, the signs being communicated by spirits. Now, there's so many different things. If you're going in the forest, so much information that might come to you. So what exactly are you looking for? What kinds of signs? The signs that'll help your group to hunt, to find a location to settle in, that'll help you to find your mission in life, that'll help you to make decisions, signs that can point to finding medicines. So these are the kind of things, these kind of signs that you're going to be looking for in the forest, okay? So this is indigenous knowledge. Okay, now let's talk about some modern sciences. So modern sciences are also based on a system of faith and knowledge. So first of all, there is an article of faith. There is a single reality, and basically which implies that there is order in the universe. If we don't consider that there's a single reality and we don't consider that there's order in the universe, we're not doing science, or we couldn't do science. It's possible to acquire correct knowledge about that reality. If we thought that it's impossible to acquire correct knowledge about that reality, it would be hard for us to do science. And also the idea that it's possible to do something with that knowledge. So these are some of the basic articles of faith. And actually there are others. And actually through this class already, maybe some of these articles of faith have been kind of challenged and you're maybe wondering. But like any critical process, right? Let these articles of faith be challenged so that then they could actually be maybe modified and they could even be stronger, okay? So we've given up on certain ideas of universality. We've started to question our notion of objectivity. So all of these things are kind of articles of faith and science. All right, well, we're actually going to put them to we're putting them to a critical test here, all right? But it's based on a system of faith. And another article of faith, and many of you have mentioned this in your questions very often, is that basically all of these sciences, so physics, biology, botany, zoology, geology, climate science, economics, sociology, anthropology, they're accumulating systematic knowledge of everything in the world and the universe. The more complete our knowledge, the more we can solve our problems and ensure a better future for all. So this is also part of the article of faith of most modern sciences. And it's generated and validated by a community of practitioners. So these are not hunters in the forest, but they're different academic communities of physicists, of zoologists, of geologists, economists, sociologists, and so on. By the way, so here I mentioned just in one slide different sciences, but there is no such thing as a single academic community. So these sciences are really distinct academic communities. The physicists are one community, anthropologists are another community, and so they all have their own ways of generating knowledge and validating knowledge. They cultivate certain attitudes, dispositions, and capacities. And we just started talking about that. Mike was just mentioning it. when he talked about virtues. Okay, so on the one hand, in order to do science, okay, you don't need to know how to hunt, but you need to have different types of literacy, of reading, of writing, calculating skills. You need to have certain attitudes. You need to be curious. You need to have certain problem solving, to love solving puzzles. You need to have critical skills. You need to have skepticism. You need to have objectivity, as we were talking. You need to have honesty. You need to have virtues of honesty, generosity. You need to have a collaborative mindset, generosity. So one thing about a modern scientific community is that, you know, in the past, like I've studied a lot about what we call Chinese knowledge, traditional Chinese knowledge. Well, that knowledge is often transmitted secretly from master to disciple. You don't publish your knowledge publicly. But in a modern science knowledge community, you have to be generously willing to share your knowledge with others and to submit it to critical scrutiny. You have to be willing to collaborate. You have to be not only willing, but able to collaborate. So there are all kinds of, it's a virtue, right, as Mike was saying. And you have to read signs in the world. What kinds of signs? Phenomena, right? So you're not looking for what can, you know, what are the creatures of the forest communicating to you. You're looking for phenomena that can be observed. But not only can they be observed, they have to be describable. I can't really think of any science that is not interested in describing things. So you have to be able to describe them, and you have to be able to, and you want to describe them with precision. In most sciences, not all, so in anthropology, we are not interested in measuring, but very often in science, the only interesting phenomena are the phenomena that can be measured. If they're not measurable, they're not interesting. You're not looking for those signs. You're only looking for measurable signs. You're looking for signs, you're looking for phenomena that can be explained with theories. And, right, so as we were just talking about, there's so many different things out there. And so members of scientific communities, of all the different information out there, they'll be most interested in those that can be written about in high impact publications. Okay, how much time do we have? Mike and Steve.
Well, for Dr. Barnes, a true video that will last for around 58 to 59 minutes.
59 minutes, right?
Yes, almost an hour.
Okay, right. So I have a little bit more time. Yeah, right. Is that right?
Yeah, maybe you can talk for like maybe 5 more minutes, maybe.
All right, then we need the, we might want to have a break. Okay, so I will go, so I will continue on the case of Chinese medicine. No, actually I won't. I'm going to skip to a very explicitly religious one, okay? So, because not enough time, but basically we have the same idea, okay? In Chinese medicine, we have a system of faith of knowledge generated and validated by a community of practitioners who cultivate certain attitudes, dispositions, and capacities to read signs in the world. But again, it's a different community who have a different way of validating and generating knowledge, who nurture different types of dispositions, attitudes, and capacities, and who read different signs. Okay, so now I'm going to take a religious community, and I'm going to take the example of the one that I am the most familiar with because I'm part of it. Okay, so the Baha'i faith. So, because some of you are asking about religious objectivity, actually, so there are many dimensions to that. But the one thing, there are 2 points that I want to make before I get into this example. First of all, religion, and we will start talking about that in 1 or 2 weeks. The prime purpose of religion is not to make descriptive statements. And we say it's about relational knowledge, okay? So it's about relationships. So we're saying it's not about faith, because as we're saying, faith exists in science too. You cannot have science without faith. It's a different kind of faith, but it's a faith, okay? So the difference between science and religion is not about faith and objective knowledge. You need faith in science, okay? So this is the first thing. And as we've had in our readings, generally speaking, but of course there would be different attitudes to this in different religious traditions and among different religious peoples, but the point of religion is not to make supernatural claims that can be empirically tested. So I'm going to give the example here of the Baha'i faith. So here, what is the system? In what way could the Baha'i religion be seen as a system of faith and knowledge? So this is, in a sense, a statement of faith in the Baha'i faith, right? That basically through our relationship with God, through his manifestations, and his manifestations means figures such as Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Baha'u'llah, and even others such as Buddha and so on, we learn through our relationship with them, we learn to recognize and cherish the attributes of God in his creation. Through practicing his teachings, we learn to nurture these spiritual qualities among humans. So the divine qualities that all of us have, we learn to recognize them and we learn to nurture them. And Baha'u'llah, the manifestation of God for this age, who is the founder of the Baha'i faith, has given us a set of teachings, principles, and institutions that basically want to establish a social order that's founded on these spiritual qualities and will bring to realization the oneness of humanity. So the Baha'i community is trying to apply these teachings, and so it's gradually gaining a body of learning and experience, so knowledge on how to do this, how to apply these principles in different spheres of life and society. So this knowledge system is generated and validated by a community of practitioners. The Baha'i faith doesn't have any priests. It doesn't have any pastors or clergy. So actually everyone in the Baha'i faith is involved in applying the teachings, discussing with others, learning from experience, sharing this experience, and coming up with common knowledge. And this takes place at the micro-local level. That means literally within your family. But then it takes place at the local level. So families discuss and consult together, but then they meet with other Baha'is in their neighborhood, in their community. They share, they learn from each other, they share experience. And that experience then is actually shared by some Baha'i representatives at the national level, that's where there's national level meetings and all these experiences are shared, and that even goes up to the global level. And at the global level, this is synthesized and then it's shared back downwards. Okay, so there's a real process from the villages to the different countries, to the whole world, in which knowledge is generated, it's discussed, it's consulted, it's synthesized, it's shared up and down in order to create a collective body of knowledge on how can we implement, how can we apply these teachings to create a better society. And so this requires some of them that are really emphasized in this process in the Baha'i community is what is often called a humble posture of learning. So if you've recognized the religious truth, you don't think, oh, now I know the truth. You actually have to keep learning and learning from others, learning from experience. So a humble posture of learning. You have to develop virtues and spiritual qualities. You have to learn to consult with others in a non-adversarial way. You have to learn to read your social reality. So in your village, what's the social reality? In your neighborhood, what's the social reality? What's the problem? What can we do to improve it? So these are certain dispositions and capacities. It doesn't happen naturally. So we have to train it. We have to learn it. And so we have to read signs in the world. So what kind of signs are Baha'is reading in the world? Well, first is discovering divine attributes in the world, divine qualities in the world and among humans. How every human is a reflection of the qualities of God. So how can we become more aware of that? But then also we learn how to read pure motives, noble motives, good motives, and lower motives, both in ourself. How can I learn my own lower motives and make sure it doesn't control me? How can I strengthen my pure motivations? How can we become aware of that among other people? To read the signs of spiritual forces and material forces, to read the signs of constructive forces. So, there are constructive forces in the world. How can we contribute to them? There are destructive forces in the world. How can we avoid them, right? So these are things that Baha'is are trying to read, these signs that they're trying to read in the world and that they generate knowledge about. So this is one religious community, and other religious communities would do things differently. But the point that I want to make is that different sciences, different systems of knowledge, different religions, they are all different types of knowledge communities. They all have their own system of faith that are based on a set of core assumptions that are generated and validated by a community of practitioners who communicate certain capacities, attitudes, and dispositions to read signs in the world. And I should say, to do something about it, and to do something about it.